My name is Grace, and I am 32 years old. 3 years ago, my mother called me on my birthday and said 8 words that finally made me see everything clearly. Your sister is expecting. Isn't that wonderful news? My birthday. She used my birthday to announce my sister's pregnancy. I was standing in my kitchen in my pajamas at 9 in the morning. Coffee going cold in my hand. I had been waiting for her call. That was the part that hurt most. Despite 32 years of evidence, I had still woken up that morning with one small quiet hope. This year, she would just call to say happy birthday. I was not enough. I never had been. Isn't that wonderful? She repeated into my silence. That's wonderful, Mom, I said. Steady. Practiced. She talked for 22 minutes. Victoria's due date. The gender reveal plans. The nursery colors. The baby names she had opinions about, detailed, specific opinions delivered with the authority of someone who considers everything within her family's orbit to also be within her jurisdiction. She did not mention my birthday. Not once. Not at the end. Not even a small casual "oh, and happy birthday, sweetheart" tucked in before she hung up. Nothing. I said goodbye. I hung up. I stood in my kitchen and drank my cold coffee and let myself finally see it clearly, not through the softening lens of 32 years of excuse-making, not filtered through "she doesn't mean it, and that's just how she is," but clearly. The way you see something when you finally stop squinting. My mother had called me on my birthday and spent 22 minutes talking about my sister. That was not an accident. That was a choice so habitual it probably required no conscious thought at all. I thought about 32 years of that choice. Every Christmas where Victoria's pile was larger. Every school play where my mother's camera found Victoria in the audience while I was on stage. Every dinner table conversation that began with my news and ended, within 3 minutes, orbiting my sister. Every achievement, the design awards, the apartment, the career built entirely alone without a dollar of parental support, met with "that's wonderful" and "did I tell you, Victoria?" 32 years of being the moon in my sister's solar system. I went to my drafting table by the window and I drew. Not for a client. Just for myself, the way I used to before I learned that my drawings would be glanced at and set aside while Victoria's macaroni art went on the refrigerator. I drew for an hour. When I finished, I looked at what I had made, abstract, layered, something that looked like a door opening onto light, and felt something settle in my chest. Not happiness. Not yet. But a decision. Small, quiet, present the way seeds are present in winter ground. Something was going to change. I just didn't know yet that it had already begun. I didn't call my mother back that day. For the first time in 32 years of birthdays, I let the day be mine. I ordered my own birthday cake, a small chocolate one from the bakery 2 streets over, the kind with buttercream roses that cost too much and was absolutely worth it. I ate 2 slices at my drafting table. I watched a movie I had been meaning to watch for months. I went to bed at 10 and slept without setting an alarm. It was the best birthday I had ever had. That told me everything I needed to know. The pattern had a name. I had known the name for years, had read about it in articles, had recognized pieces of it in conversations with friends, had even discussed it carefully around the edges with my therapist, Dr. Lena, without ever fully committing to saying it out loud. Narcissistic mother. Golden child. Scapegoat. The words felt dramatic when applied to my own life. That was the thing about growing up inside this particular dynamic. It trained you to minimize your own experience. To compare your situation to something worse and conclude that yours didn't qualify. To hear yourself say "my mother favored my sister" and immediately add, "but she loves us both," really before anyone could agree with the first part. I had been adding that qualifier for 32 years. I stopped adding it the morning after my birthday. I called my best friend Diane instead. Diane, who had known me for 8 years, who had watched my mother at my college graduation spend 40 minutes telling other guests about Victoria's acceptance to law school while I held my own diploma. Diane, who had sat across from me at 100 dinners while I explained away another incident, offered another qualification, performed another round of "she doesn't mean it that way." "My mother called me on my birthday," I said when she answered, "to announce Victoria's pregnancy. She didn't mention my birthday once." Silence. Then, "Grace." "I know," I said. "No." Her voice was careful, precise. The voice of someone choosing words with intention. "I need you to hear me say this clearly. What your mother does to you, it's not normal. It's not just how she is. It's not something you caused or deserve or need to manage better. It is a consistent, deliberate pattern of making you invisible in your own life." I sat with that for a long moment. Invisible in my own life. I thought about Victoria, my sister who I genuinely loved, who was not cruel, who was simply the person our mother had decided to pour everything into while I stood at the edge of that pouring and caught what spilled. Victoria wasn't the villain of this story. She was just the chosen one. And being chosen by our mother meant being shaped by her too, dependent, approval-seeking, unable to make a decision without a phone call first. In some ways I had gotten the better deal. In the ways that had left marks, I had not. "I have a therapy appointment Wednesday," I told Diane. "Good," she said. "Tell Dr. Lena everything." Not the edited version. I knew what she meant. The edited version was the one where I balanced every criticism with a defense, where I made my mother three-dimensional and understandable and ultimately forgivable before Dr. Lena had a chance to respond to the original thing. The edited version protected my mother at the expense of my own truth. I was done editing. Wednesday came. I sat across from Dr. Lena in her quiet office with a small plant on the windowsill and the particular quality of attention she brought to everything, and I told her the unedited version. The birthday call. The 22 minutes. The silence where my name should have been. And then, because I had decided to stop squinting, I went further back. The Christmas piles. The school plays. The graduation. The design awards met with "Did I tell you, Victoria?" The shower planning, "You're so good at the organizational things." 32 years of being the reliable one, the structural beam, the daughter who held things together while everyone admired what was being held. Dr. Lena listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "How long have you known?" "Always," I said. I just kept explaining it away. She nodded slowly. "What changed?" I thought about my cold coffee, my drafting table, the drawing that looked like a door opening onto light. "I stopped waiting," I said, "for her to call and just say happy birthday. I finally accepted that she never will." Dr. Lena looked at me carefully. "That acceptance," she said quietly, "is the beginning of everything." I drove home in the early evening light and sat in my car outside my building for a few minutes before going in. The city moved around me, ordinary Thursday, people finishing work, a woman walking a dog, two children racing each other down the pavement. All of it continuing. As it always did. I was continuing too. Just differently now. With my eyes open. Victoria's baby shower was scheduled for the first Saturday in April. My mother had been planning it since January, which meant I had been planning it since January, because that was what "you're so good at the organizational things" actually meant in practice. Vendor calls. Venue coordination. Guest list management. The careful diplomatic navigation of my mother's vision versus the venue's actual capabilities versus the budget that kept expanding because my mother had expensive taste and Victoria's husband Marcus was doing well financially, and somehow this, translated into Grace, can handle the details. I handled the details. 54 guests. Pale pink and gold color scheme. 4-course luncheon. Custom floral arrangements, which I had also designed because my mother had seen my portfolio and said, "You could do something like this, couldn't you?" As if graphic design and floral arrangement were the same skill, which they are not. But I had learned enough from a florist friend to make it work. The shower was beautiful. I say that without vanity, it was genuinely, objectively beautiful. The venue glowed. The flowers were extraordinary. The food arrived on time and hot. The games I had organized ran smoothly. The custom signage I had designed and printed was elegant and warm and perfectly on theme. My mother walked in, looked around, and said, "Victoria is going to love this." Not, "Grace, this is incredible." Not, "You did an amazing job." Just, "Victoria is going to love this." As if the shower had assembled itself. As if the 3 months of work had happened through some impersonal organizational force rather than through me, specifically, spending my evenings and weekends making something beautiful for a sister I loved and a mother who would not see me doing it. I smiled. I said, "I hope so." Victoria arrived 20 minutes later in a cream dress that made her look luminous, genuinely luminous. She was beautiful and I loved her, and I felt both of those things simultaneously with no contradiction. And she walked through the door and stopped and looked around, and her eyes filled with tears. "Mom," she said, "this is perfect." My mother beamed. I stood near the floral centerpiece I had arranged at 11 the previous night and watched my mother accept my sister's gratitude for my work and felt something I had not expected. Not anger. Not this time. Clarity. Because here was the thing I understood. Standing in that beautiful room that I had built, this was never going to change. My mother was never going to turn to Victoria and say, "Actually, Grace did all of this." She was never going to redirect the credit, share the moment, make space for me in the narrative she had been constructing for 32 years. This was simply who she was. And I had a choice about what I did with that knowledge. I could keep showing up, keep handling the organizational things, keep building beautiful spaces and watching other people stand in the center of them, keep filing away the moments that hurt and adding my qualifiers and protecting my mother from the full truth of what she did to me. Or I could stop. Not dramatically. Not with a confrontation in the middle of Victoria's baby shower surrounded by 54 guests. But stop, quietly, permanently, the way you stop doing something when you finally understand that continuing it is a choice and choices have alternatives. The shower continued around me. My mother circulated. Victoria opened gifts with the particular delight of a woman who is genuinely happy and has never had reason to question whether she deserves to be. The guests ate and laughed, and the flowers I had arranged caught the afternoon light and were extraordinary. At some point Diane appeared beside me. She had been invited, she knew Victoria, liked her genuinely, and she stood beside me near the window with her champagne glass and looked at the room, and then at me. "You did all of this," she said quietly. Not a question. "Yes," I said. And Diane tilted her head toward my mother. "Didn't mention it," I said. "No." Diane was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I had not expected and have not forgotten. "You know what I see when I look at this room," she said. "I see you. Your eye. Your taste. Your 3 months of work. I see Grace everywhere in here." She paused. "Your mother can take the credit. She can't take what's actually here." I looked at the room. At the flowers and the light and the careful, beautiful thing I had built. She was right. It was mine. Regardless of who stood in the center of it. The shower ended at 4. Guests filtered out. Victoria hugged me warmly. She was always warm with me, genuinely, in the uncomplicated way of someone who has never been taught to see me as competition, because competition requires acknowledging 2 players. "Thank you for coming," she said. I hugged her back. My mother was already across the room talking to one of her friends, animated and bright, not looking in my direction. I picked up my bag. I walked to the door. And I left without waiting to be thanked. That was new. I called Dr. Lena the Monday after the shower. Not for a scheduled appointment. I called between sessions, which I had never done before, because something had shifted at that shower and I needed to name it before it settled back into the familiar pattern of minimization and excuse. I left without waiting to be thanked, I told her. A pause. "How did that feel?" "Strange," I said. And then relieving. Like putting down something heavy I didn't realize I was still carrying. "What were you carrying?" I thought about it honestly. "Hope," I said. I was still carrying hope that this time she would see me. That this time she would say, "Grace, you did this. Grace, this was you." I stopped. I left before she could not say it. And somehow that felt better than staying and waiting. Dr. Lena was quiet for a moment. Grace, she said carefully, I want to ask you something. In all our sessions, and we've been talking for 2 years, you have never once used the word that describes what you've been experiencing. You've described the behavior. You've described the impact. But you've always stopped short of the word itself. A pause. Are you ready to say it? I sat in my car in the parking lot outside my office building where I had pulled over to make this call, and I looked at the ordinary Monday afternoon outside my windshield, people walking, clouds moving, a pigeon investigating something on the pavement with complete absorption. Narcissistic, I said. My mother is narcissistic. And I have been the scapegoat. And Victoria has been the golden child. And I have spent 32 years trying to earn love from someone who was never going to give it the way I needed it. Silence. Then Dr. Lena said, How does it feel to say that out loud? Like the floor just became solid, I said. I told Diane over dinner that Thursday. Not the careful version. The full version, the word, the pattern, the 32 years, all of it laid out on the table between our pasta and our wine with none of the qualifiers I usually added. Diane listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached across the table and put her hand over mine. I have been waiting 8 years for you to say that, she said. You knew. Grace. Her voice was gentle, but completely certain. I watched your mother at your graduation. I have watched her at every dinner, every event, every casual mention of your achievements. I have watched her take up all the space in every room she shares with you. She paused. I didn't say anything because it wasn't mine to say. But I have known for 8 years. I thought about 8 years of Diane watching. Waiting. Never pushing. Just being present and consistent, and there, the quiet, faithful presence of someone who has decided you matter and is willing to wait as long as it takes for you to decide the same about yourself. I'm sorry it took me this long, I said. Don't apologize, she said immediately. It takes as long as it takes. The important thing is you're here now. The conversation with Victoria happened 3 weeks later. Not planned. Victoria called on a Tuesday evening, a normal call, the kind we had periodically, warm and uncomplicated because my relationship with my sister had always been separate from my relationship with my mother, existing in its own cleaner space. We talked for a while about the pregnancy, the nursery, her husband Marcus's excitement. Then she asked how I was doing, genuinely asked, in the way she had. And I told her the truth. Not everything. Not the full weight of 32 years delivered onto a pregnant woman on a Tuesday evening. But enough. The birthday call. The shower. The organizational things comment. Victoria was quiet for a long time. Grace, she said finally. Her voice was different, slower, something moving in it. I didn't know about the birthday call. I didn't know she called you that day. I know you didn't, I said. The shower, she stopped. I assumed you had helped. I didn't know you had done everything. Another pause. Why didn't you say something? Because saying something felt like making your shower about me, I said. And I didn't want to do that. But it was about you, Victoria said. It was your work. Grace, that was entirely your work. I had not expected her to say that so plainly. So immediately. Without defending our mother or minimizing or adding the qualifiers I had always added myself. Yes, I said quietly. It was. Victoria was silent for a moment. I'm going to talk to Mom, she said. Victoria. Not to cause a fight, she said. I need to understand something. I need to understand how I have been so close to this my whole life and not seen it. I thought about that. About Victoria growing up inside the same house, inside the same dynamic, from the other side. The golden child who never had to fight for a seat at the table because the table was always set for her. Who had never been taught to see the other side because the other side was invisible by design. She wasn't cruel. She had simply never been shown. Be gentle with yourself about that, I said. It's very hard to see something you've never been given reason to look for. She was quiet again. I love you, Grace, she said. Simply. Completely. I love you too, I said. And I meant it, complicated and whole and without the shadow of competition our mother had tried to place between us. We hung up. I sat in my apartment in the Tuesday evening quiet and felt something unfamiliar moving in my chest. Not the cold clarity of the birthday morning. Not the quiet decision of the shower. Something warmer. The particular feeling of being seen by someone who matters. It was small. Tentative. The first green thing pushing through winter ground. But it was real. And real, I was learning, was the only place anything good could actually grow. May arrived warm and unhurried. The city outside my window shed its gray and committed finally to color, the trees along my street fully green, window boxes appearing overnight like small declarations, the particular quality of spring light that makes ordinary things look considered and beautiful. I noticed it differently that year. Because I had spent the previous months learning to pay attention to small things, quiet things, the particular texture of an ordinary Wednesday that contains, if you look carefully enough, everything you need. Dr. Lena had given me that. The therapy sessions had given me that. The slow, unglamorous work of seeing clearly had given me a sensitivity to beauty I had always possessed, but buried under 32 years of working too hard to be noticed. I started painting. Not professionally, graphic design was my profession and I loved it. But painting for myself in the evenings at the small table by the window where the light was best. Watercolors first, then acrylics, then a combination of both that produced something I didn't have a name for but recognized as mine. Diane came over one evening and stood in front of a piece I had finished the night before, abstract, layered, warm golds and deep greens, and said nothing for a long moment. "Grace," she said finally. "I know it's not." "Don't," she said. "Don't qualify it. It's extraordinary." I looked at the painting. At the colors I had chosen without thinking, that had arrived through my hands from somewhere below conscious decision. The particular warmth of them. The way they moved together without conflict. "Thank you," I said. Simply. Without deflecting. That was new too. My mother called on a Thursday in mid-May. I had been expecting it. Victoria had told me she'd spoken to her, had not told me what was said, had only texted afterward. I tried. "I love you," which told me enough. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. "Grace." Her voice was different. Not the bright Victoria voice, not the organizational things voice. Something flatter. Carefully composed. "Hi, Mom. Victoria tells me you've been feeling overlooked." The word landed with quotation marks around it. The particular tone of someone repeating a word they find slightly dramatic. "That's one way to put it," I said. "I don't know what I've done to give you that impression." Smooth. Reasonable. The voice of a woman who has spent a lifetime being the reasonable one in every room. "I've always been proud of you, Grace. You know that." I had prepared for this. Not with a script. Dr. Lena had cautioned against scripts, said they made you rigid when conversations turned unexpected. But with clarity. A clear understanding of what I wanted to say and what I was not willing to accept as a response. "Mom," I said, "you called me on my birthday this year and spent 22 minutes talking about Victoria's pregnancy. You didn't mention my birthday once." Silence. "I'm sure I said happy birthday." "You didn't," I said. Calm. Certain. I remember the conversation clearly. Another silence. Different from the first, less composed. "The shower," I continued. "I planned and executed Victoria's entire baby shower. The venue, the catering, the guest list, the flowers, the signage. All of it. You walked in and said Victoria is going to love this. Not Grace, you did an incredible job. Not thank you for everything you put into this. Just Victoria is going to love this." I didn't realize. "I know you didn't," I said. "That's what I need you to understand, Mom. You don't realize. You have never realized. Because noticing my contributions would require looking at me, and looking at me has never been something that came naturally to you." The silence that followed was the longest yet. I sat in it without filling it. Without apologizing for the words or softening them or adding the qualifier. I let them exist in the space between us, and I did not take them back. "That's not fair," my mother said finally. Her voice had shifted again, something beneath the composure now, something that might have been genuine hurt or might have been the performance of it. With my mother, I had never been entirely certain which was which. Maybe not, I said. But it's true. I love you, Grace. I know you do, I said. In the way you're capable of. But the way you're capable of has never been quite enough for me. And I spent 32 years trying to make it enough, and I'm not doing that anymore. She was quiet. What does that mean? She said. Smaller now. The composed voice fully gone. It means I'm going to stop making myself available for things that make me invisible, I said. It means I'm going to stop being the organizational things person and start being a person. It means that when something hurts me, I'm going to say so instead of filing it away. You're saying you don't want a relationship with me. I'm saying I want a different kind of relationship, I said. An honest one. One where I exist in it. She said nothing for a long moment. Then, I'll need to think about this. Take all the time you need, I said. We said goodbye. We hung up. I sat in my apartment in the May evening with the painting on the wall and the plants on the windowsill and the particular quiet of a space that was entirely mine. I had said the true thing. Out loud. To her. Without taking it back. Something that had been clenched inside me for 32 years slowly, incrementally, began to release. Not all at once. Nothing real happens all at once. But the beginning of release. Which was, I was learning how everything important started. Victoria called me the Sunday after my conversation with our mother. Not a text, a call. Which was itself significant. Victoria and I had always been texters, our relationship conducted largely through the quick, efficient language of messages rather than the slower, more exposed medium of actual voices. Calls meant something was different. I answered immediately. How are you? She asked. And then, before I could give the automatic fine, actually. How are you actually? I smiled at my window. Better, I said. Honestly, better. Mom called me, Victoria said. After you talked to her. A pause. She was upset. I imagine so, I said. She said you told her she'd never been a good mother to you. I considered that. The translation of what I had actually said into what my mother had heard, or chosen to present to Victoria. The gap between those two things was itself information. That's not what I said, I told her. I said the way she loves me has never been quite enough for me. And that I spent 32 years trying to make it enough. Silence. Grace, Victoria said slowly. Can I ask you something? And I need you to be honest with me even if the answer's hard. Yes, I said. Did I make it worse? Her voice was careful. Carrying something. Growing up. Did the way Mom treated me, did that make things harder for you? I sat with the question. Because it deserved a real answer. Not a generous one designed to protect her feelings. Not a brutal one designed to assign blame she didn't deserve. A real one. You didn't do anything wrong, I said finally. You were a child. You didn't choose to be the favorite. You didn't ask for it. I paused. But yes. Watching how easily love flowed toward you, how naturally the space arranged itself around you, yes, that was hard. Not because of you. Because of what it showed me about how she saw me. Victoria was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Lower. Something stripped of its usual ease. I've been thinking, she said, about our childhood. Trying to actually look at it instead of just remembering it the way I've always remembered it. She stopped. Grace, I found a photo last week. Your school art show. You were 12. You won first place, do you remember that? I remember, I said. Mom isn't in any of the photos, Victoria said. I looked through all of them. Dad is there in 2 of them. But Mom, she wasn't there, was she? No, I said. She wasn't. She was at my volleyball game, Victoria said quietly. I remember because she brought those terrible orange slices and the other mothers loved her for it. A pause. I didn't know, Grace. About the art show. I didn't know she missed it. I know you didn't, I said. I'm sorry, she said. Simply. Without qualification or defense or the careful balancing act of someone protecting their own comfort. Just, I'm sorry. Offered cleanly. Something shifted in my chest. Thank you, I said. We talked for 2 hours. Really talked, the kind that happens when two people decide simultaneously to stop performing their relationship and start actually having it. Victoria told me things I hadn't known. Moments from our childhood she remembered differently now that she was looking at them honestly. The pressure our mother had placed on her too, different pressure. The pressure of being the chosen one, of having to maintain the pedestal, of never being allowed to fail because failure would reflect on the woman who had staked her identity on Victoria's success. The golden child, I was understanding, was not as free as she appeared. She was just trapped differently. I've been calling Mom every day, Victoria said. For my entire adult life, I have called her every single day. Do you know why? Because she needs it, I said. Because if I don't, she makes me feel guilty for a week, Victoria said. Little comments. Sighs. The specific silence she uses when she wants you to know she's hurt without having to say it. She paused. I thought that was just love. I thought that was what closeness felt like. It's not, I said gently. I know that now, she said. I'm starting to know that now. We were quiet together for a moment, two sisters on the phone in their separate apartments in the same city, separated by the particular geography of a childhood that had been arranged to keep us from seeing each other clearly. Seeing each other clearly now. I want to have lunch, Victoria said. Just us. Not at Mom's, not a family thing. Just you and me. Yes, I said immediately. Tuesday. We met at a small Italian place near her apartment. Victoria's suggestion, neutral ground. Just two women at a corner table with pasta and wine, and the slightly awkward sincerity of people who are meeting each other for the first time inside a relationship they have had their whole lives. It was awkward for exactly 15 minutes. Then Victoria laughed at something I said, really laughed, the full uncontained kind, and something relaxed between us that I think had been tense since childhood without either of us knowing it. We talked about everything. Her pregnancy, the real version, the scared, excited, exhausted version rather than the curated one presented for our mother's audience. My work. She asked real questions, wanted to actually understand what I did, looked at photographs of my portfolio on my phone with genuine attention. She asked about the paintings. I showed her photographs of those too. She looked at them for a long time. Grace, she said. These are really something. Diane said the same thing, I said. Diane is right. She handed my phone back. Have you ever thought about showing them? They're just for me, I said. Things that are just for you, Victoria said carefully, are allowed to also be for other people. Those aren't mutually exclusive. I looked at her across the table. At this woman I had loved my whole life from a careful distance, kept there by a dynamic neither of us had designed and both of us had simply inherited. Not at a distance anymore. Right here. Across the table. Asking real questions and saying true things and laughing the real laugh. When did you get so wise? I said. She smiled. I've been going to therapy for 3 weeks, she said. Apparently I have some things to work through. I laughed. She laughed. And for the first time in 32 years, my sister and I were simply together. Not arranged around someone else's center. Just us. At our own table. Finally. Summer arrived the way good things often do. Quietly. Without announcement. One morning I woke up and the light through my window was different, fuller, warmer, the particular gold of a season that has fully committed to itself, and I lay in bed and noticed it and felt, for the first time in as long as I could remember, genuinely glad to be awake. That was new. Not performed gratitude. Not the kind you tell yourself you should feel. The real kind, uncomplicated, unprompted, simply there when I checked. I checked more often now. Dr. Lena called it attunement. Learning to notice what you actually feel rather than what you've decided you're supposed to feel. It sounds simple. It is one of the most difficult things I have ever practiced. My mother had been quiet for 3 weeks after our conversation. Not the warm quiet of someone reflecting. The strategic quiet, the specific silence she deployed when she wanted you to feel her absence. I recognized it because I had felt it my entire childhood, that particular atmospheric pressure of my mother's disapproval filling a room without a word being spoken. I had spent 32 years adjusting my behavior to relieve that pressure. This time I let it sit. I went to work. I painted in the evenings. I had lunch with Victoria every Tuesday. It had become a standing thing, our Tuesday lunches, the best new thing in my life. I talked to Diane. I went to therapy. I lived my life in the quiet of my mother's strategic silence and discovered something that genuinely surprised me. The silence was fine. Better than fine. The silence meant no birthday calls that weren't about my birthday. No organizational things. No did I tell you, Victoria. The silence was, in its unexpected way, the most peace I had felt in years. I told Dr. Lena that. She nodded slowly. What does that tell you? That a lot of what I was calling relationship, I said, was actually just management. I was managing her. And the absence of that management feels like rest. Yes, Dr. Lena said simply. My mother broke her silence on a Wednesday evening. Not with a call, with a visit. She appeared at my door at 6:30 without warning, which was itself a statement. My mother knew I valued my space. Arriving unannounced was a power move, whether she would have named it that or not. I opened the door. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but the particular way she compressed herself when she wanted to appear wounded. The armor replaced by something that wanted to look like vulnerability. Can I come in? She said. I stepped back. Of course. She came in. She looked around my apartment with the careful eyes she always brought to spaces, assessing, cataloging. She stopped at the painting on the wall. The gold and green one Diane had called extraordinary. She looked at it for a moment. Is this yours? She said. Yes, I said. She said nothing about it. Moved on. We sat in the living room. I made tea because having something to do with my hands felt important. She sat on my couch with her bag in her lap and her hands around the mug I gave her, and she looked at me with an expression I had to work to read. I've been thinking, she said, about what you said. Okay, I said. I want you to know, she stopped. Started again. I didn't realize. About the birthday. About the shower. She looked at her tea. I'm not good at seeing things from outside myself. I know that's not an excuse. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. But it was the closest thing to self-awareness I had ever heard from her, and I sat with it carefully, turning it over, not rushing to either accept or reject it. Thank you for saying that, I said. I don't want to lose you, she said. You're my daughter. I know, I said. And I'm not going anywhere. But things need to be different. Different how? I had thought about this. With Dr. Lena, with Diane, with myself in the quiet of my painting evenings. What different actually looked like. Not a punishment. Not a wall. A door with a lock I controlled. I need you to see me, I said. Not as the reliable one. Not as the organizational things person. Me, my work, my life, my achievements. I need those to matter to you the way Victoria's matter. She was quiet. I need you to stop using my space, my birthday, my conversations, my time, to talk about Victoria. Victoria has her own relationship with you. Mine is separate. I didn't know I was doing that, she said. I know, I said. Now you do. She looked at her tea again. Something moved across her face, the complicated interior weather of a woman being asked to change a pattern so deeply embedded she had never seen it as a pattern at all. And if I slip, she said. If I do it without realizing? Then I'll tell you, I said. Calmly. In the moment. And I need you to hear it without making me the problem for saying it. She nodded slowly. That's going to be hard for me, she said. Honestly. Which was itself something. I know, I said. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for effort. We sat in the quiet of my apartment for a while. Not comfortable exactly, too much history for comfortable, too much that had been said and couldn't be unsaid, too much that still needed time and consistent behavior to become anything real. But present. Both of us in the same room, trying. Before she left, she stopped at the painting again. Looked at it longer this time. It's beautiful, she said, quietly, without the asterisk of comparison or the pivot to Victoria. Just, it's beautiful. 2 words. Small. Insufficient for 32 years. But real. I watched her go down the hallway toward the elevator. She turned once, briefly, and something in her face was different from any expression I had seen there before. Not the composed public face. Not the strategic vulnerability. Something older and more uncertain. The face of a woman who had been shown something about herself and was not yet sure what to do with it. I closed my door. I stood in my hallway for a moment. Then I went back to my painting table. The evening light was still good. I had a new piece started, blues this time, deep and layered, something that was taking its own shape without my quite knowing yet what it wanted to be. I picked up my brush, and I let it become what it needed to become. Autumn came in quietly that year. The trees along my street turned slowly, green to gold to the particular burnt amber of October, and I watched it happen from my window with the unhurried attention of someone who has learned that ordinary beauty is not ordinary at all. It is, in fact, the whole thing. The entire point. The thing that was always there waiting for you to stop being too busy surviving to notice it. I noticed everything differently now. Work had become extraordinary. Not because anything external had changed dramatically, same clients, same briefs, same industry, but because something internal had shifted, and internal shifts change everything you touch. I had stopped apologizing for my creative instincts. For years I had done it, in client meetings, in presentations, even in my own private process. A kind of preemptive shrinking, offering 2 options when I believed completely in one, hedging my strongest ideas with, though of course this is just one direction, before anyone had a chance to respond. The same pattern I had learned at home, translated into professional language. A client had said something to me in September that I hadn't been able to stop thinking about. We were reviewing a branding proposal, a complete identity system I had developed for a boutique architecture firm, something I was genuinely proud of, clean and structural and warm in equal measure. I had presented it without hedging, for the first time, simply walking them through the work and explaining the thinking behind each decision. The client, a woman named Patricia, 50s, the kind of person who had built something real and knew the difference between genuine confidence and performed confidence, had looked at the presentation and then at me. "You know this is right," she said. Not a question. "Yes," I said. Simply. She had smiled. "I can tell. It's different from your previous pitches." She paused. "Don't lose that." I thought about that a lot. About the version of me that had pitched to Patricia 6 months ago, the hedging, the 2 options, the preemptive apology for my own certainty. And the version sitting across from her now, who had done the work and trusted it and said yes when she asked if I knew it was right. The second version got the contract. The second version also got a referral. Patricia mentioned me to a colleague, a restaurant group looking to rebrand across 5 locations. The kind of project that required exactly the combination of strategic and creative thinking I had spent my career developing. I took the meeting. I presented with the same quiet certainty. I got the project. By October, I had more work than I could manage alone. I hired an assistant. A young designer named Felix, 24, absurdly talented, the kind of person who made you optimistic about the future of the field. I spent 3 weeks teaching him how I thought, watching him absorb it and then push it somewhere slightly further, and felt something I hadn't expected. Pride. In someone else's growth. In having something worth passing on. Victoria had her baby in June. A girl. 6 pounds, 9 ounces, born on a Thursday morning when the city was still waking up. Victoria had texted me from the hospital at 5:47 a.m. "She's here. She's perfect. Come when you can." I had cried in my kitchen before I even put my coffee on. I went that afternoon. Sat in the hospital chair beside Victoria's bed and held this small new person, Eleanor. They had named her after Marcus's grandmother, and felt something I had no adequate word for. The particular weightlessness of holding a life that has not yet been shaped by anything. That is still entirely itself, entirely potential, entirely unmarked. I looked at Eleanor and made her a private promise. She would know she was seen. Whatever else happened in her family, in her life, in the complicated inheritance of being human, she would know, from her Aunt Grace, that she was seen and specific and worth paying attention to. I was going to make sure of that. My mother was at the hospital too. We navigated it the way we had been navigating things since our conversation in my apartment, carefully, imperfectly, with the deliberate attention of two people who have agreed to try without any guarantee of success. She had slipped twice since then. Once in August, a phone call that had drifted inevitably toward a long account of Victoria's pregnancy milestones until I had said, calmly, "Mom, you're doing the thing." A pause. Then a genuine, "You're right. I'm sorry. How are you?" Small, but real. Once in September, a family dinner where she had introduced me to an old friend as my daughter Grace, Victoria's sister. My identity as appendage. I had said nothing in the moment. Some battles are not worth the dinner table, but I had mentioned it to her later, privately, and she had looked genuinely stricken. "I didn't realize I said it that way," she had said. "I know," I had said. "Now you do." 2 slips. 2 conversations. 2 moments of something that was not quite accountability, but was moving in that direction. It was not healed. I want to be honest about that. 32 years of a pattern does not dissolve in 6 months of trying. What was happening between my mother and me was slow, non-linear, 2 steps forward and 1 step back, the unglamorous reality of people attempting to change dynamics that have been calcified for decades. But it was real. And real was all I had ever asked for. I showed my paintings in October. A small gallery 2 streets from my apartment, the owner, a woman named Sylvie, had seen a photograph Diane had posted and sent me a message asking if I had ever considered exhibiting. I had said yes before the fear could say no. 12 pieces. A Thursday evening. White wine and about 40 people. Diane was there. Victoria came, Marcus beside her, Eleanor in a carrier against his chest, sleeping through the entire thing with the magnificent indifference of a 2-month-old. Felix came with his girlfriend, Dr. Lena, whom I had invited on an impulse that felt important. My mother came. I had not been certain she would. I had invited her without expectation, had genuinely prepared myself for either outcome, her presence or her absence, because I was learning that outcomes could not be controlled, only responded to. She arrived early. Stood quietly near the entrance looking at the pieces in order, moving slowly, not talking to anyone. She spent the longest time at the one I had painted the night after our apartment conversation, the blues piece, deep and layered, the one that had taken its own shape. She stood in front of it for several minutes. When she found me in the room, her eyes were different. Not performing. Not composing herself for an audience. Just open. The raw, unguarded expression of someone who has been shown something they didn't expect. "The blue one," she said. "Yes," I said. "That one is about us," she said. Not a question. I looked at her. "Yes," I said. She nodded slowly. She looked back at the painting across the room. "It's the most beautiful thing in here," she said quietly. And then she did something she had not done since I was very small. She put her arm around me. Not a performance. Not for the room. Just her arm, around my shoulders, standing beside me looking at the painting I had made from the truest and most painful material of my life. I leaned into it. Just slightly. Just for a moment. But I leaned in. Winter arrived the way it always does after a year of hard things. Quietly. The light changing first, lower, softer, arriving later and leaving earlier until one morning you realize, without knowing exactly when it happened, that the year has turned some fundamental corner and everything ahead is new. I felt it differently that year. Because I was different that year. Not transformed. I want to be careful about that word. The way it implies a sudden complete metamorphosis rather than the slow accumulated work of hundreds of small choices made in the direction of your own life. I had not been transformed. I had been returned. Slowly, imperfectly, with setbacks and wrong turns and days when the old pattern surfaced and I had to consciously choose differently. But returned to myself. To the Grace who had existed before 32 years of invisibility had taught her to make herself small. She had always been there, just waiting for someone to look. Dr. Lena and I had our final session in November. Not because everything was resolved, she had been clear, and I had internalized that healing is not a destination with a finish line. But because I had arrived somewhere. A place of sufficient groundedness, sufficient tools, sufficient trust in my own perception and voice and worth to continue without the weekly anchor of her quiet office and the small plant on the windowsill. Tell me about the Grace who exists now, she said. Same question she had asked at the beginning in our first session. The symmetry of it intentional. I thought about it honestly. She knows what she feels, I said. Not always immediately. Sometimes it takes a day or two to identify it accurately. But she gets there. I paused. She paints. She has shown her work twice now and is planning a larger show in spring. She has a business that is genuinely thriving, not despite her instincts, but because of them. I paused again. She has a sister. A real one, not the performance of one. Tuesday lunches, honest conversations, the slightly terrifying and completely wonderful experience of being known by someone who shares your history. And your mother? Dr. Lena asked carefully. I sat with that question. A work in progress, I said. On both our parts. She slips. I tell her. She tries again. It's not what I always wanted it to be. I stopped. But it's more honest than it's ever been. And honest feels better than comfortable, even when it's harder. Dr. Lena nodded slowly. And who is Grace, she said. Beyond all of it. I looked at the plant on her windowsill. Thought about the question the way it deserved to be thought about. Someone who stopped waiting to be chosen, I said finally. And started choosing herself instead. Dr. Lena smiled. The real one, not the professional warmth, but the genuine article. The expression of someone who has watched a person do hard work and is glad to have been present for it. That, she said, is everything. Christmas that year was different. My mother hosted, she always hosted, the family gathering at her house with its familiar architecture of tradition and tension. But I arrived differently this year. Not braced. Not armored. Not carrying the accumulated dread of 32 previous Christmases spent managing my own invisibility. Just present. Myself. Ready to enjoy what was good and respond to what wasn't. Victoria was there with Marcus and Eleanor, 4 months old now, sitting up with assistants, regarding the world with the profound seriousness of someone encountering Christmas for the first time and finding it adequately interesting. I spent considerable time on the floor with Eleanor, making faces that made her produce the specific sound that is not quite a laugh yet, but is its clear ancestor. My mother watched us from across the room. I caught her expression twice, both times unguarded, both times carrying something I had not seen there before in relation to me. Not the organizational things look. Not the Victoria pivot look. Something softer. Something that was paying attention. After dinner, while Marcus was putting Eleanor down in the spare room and Victoria was helping with dishes, my mother came and sat beside me on the couch. Just the two of us. The way it almost never was. She had a small wrapped gift in her hands. I wanted to give you this separately, she said. Not in the pile. I looked at the gift. Small, rectangular, wrapped in deep green paper with a ribbon that had been tied with more care than my mother usually gave to wrapping. Mom. Open it, she said. I unwrapped it carefully. It was a photograph. Framed, a simple, elegant frame, clearly chosen deliberately. The photograph was black and white, slightly grainy the way old photographs are, and it showed a girl of about 12 standing in front of a display of artwork, holding a ribbon, looking directly at the camera with an expression of pure unselfconscious pride. Me, at 12, at the school art show my mother had missed. I stared at it. Where did you find this? I said. Your father took it, she said quietly. I found it in a box of his things last month. She paused. I had it framed. My father had been gone for 4 years, a gentle man, not strong enough to change anything but present enough to occasionally witness it. He had been at the art show. I remembered his camera. I had not known he kept the photograph. I held the frame in both hands and looked at 12-year-old Grace with her ribbon and her pride and felt the grief of it, not just for the show my mother had missed, but for all the shows, all the ribbons, all the moments of achievement that had happened in the peripheral vision of a woman looking somewhere else. I'm sorry I wasn't there, my mother said. Simply. Without qualification. Without the defensive pivot or the reasonable explanation or the careful composure. Just, I'm sorry I wasn't there. I looked at her. Her eyes were full. Not performing, the real kind, the kind that arrives before you can arrange your face around it. Thank you for this, I said. My voice was not quite steady. Thank you for finding it and framing it and giving it to me separately. She nodded. Pressed her lips together. I'm trying, she said. I know, I said. I can see that. We sat together on the couch in the warm light of the Christmas living room and looked at the photograph of 12-year-old Grace and her ribbon. Not healed. Not resolved. Not the ending of a story. Just two women in a room with the truth between them. Trying. Which was, I was learning, the most honest thing two people could do. I drove home that night through the Christmas quiet city, streets emptier than usual, lit windows everywhere, the particular warmth of a world that has gathered itself indoors. I drove past my old neighborhood, past the school where the art show had been, past the bakery where I had bought my own birthday cake in January, the chocolate one with the buttercream roses. I thought about that morning. The cold coffee. The 8 words. The small quiet decision that had no name yet but was alive nonetheless. Everything that had grown from it. Dr. Lena. The paintings. The gallery shows. The business that trusted its own instincts. The Tuesday lunches with Victoria. Eleanor on the floor making her almost laugh. My mother in a green-papered package, giving me back a moment she had missed. Not a fairy tale. Real life, complicated and nonlinear and sometimes painful and occasionally, unexpectedly, extraordinarily beautiful. Mine. I parked outside my building. Sat in the car for a moment. Then I went upstairs to my apartment. My kitchen. My paintings on the wall. My plants on the windowsill, all 6 of them, even the struggling ones, still alive, still trying. I made tea. I sat at my table and held the framed photograph of 12-year-old Grace and looked at her for a long time. She had known even then. Even at 12 with her ribbon and her pride. She had known she was capable of something real and worth seeing. She had just been waiting for the world to catch up. I see you, I said to her quietly. I've always seen you. I set the photograph on my drafting table where the morning light would find it. And I went to bed in the middle of my own life. Ready for what came next. 1 year later. I want to tell you what 1 year looks like from the inside. Not the curated version, not the highlight reel of growth and healing presented in a way that makes transformation seem clean and inevitable. The real version. Because the real version is the one that might actually help you. 1 year later looks like this. It looks like a Tuesday lunch with Victoria that runs 3 hours because we lose track of time talking about real things. It looks like Eleanor at 11 months old reaching for me specifically when I walk into a room, that particular infant preference that means nothing intellectually and means everything emotionally. It looks like my mother calling on my birthday this year and saying Happy Birthday Grace before anything else, just those 3 words, and me standing in my kitchen understanding that 3 words after 33 years is both insufficient and genuinely something. It looks like Felix presenting a concept to a client last month with the same quiet certainty I have been practicing, and me watching him and understanding that confidence is not a fixed quantity, but a thing that moves between people when they are generous with it. It looks like 12 paintings sold and a spring show confirmed and Sylvie, the gallery owner, calling them the most emotionally honest work she has exhibited in 5 years. It looks like sitting in my car outside Dr. Lena's building on a Wednesday morning. I still go occasionally, not weekly, the maintenance version, and realizing I am not dreading the session. That I am going not because I am broken and need fixing, but because I have a rich interior life worth tending, and therapy is one of the tools I use to tend it. 1 year later also looks like this. It looks like 3 a.m. on a random Thursday when the old grief surfaces, not for my mother specifically, not even for the childhood I didn't have, but for something more abstract. The years. The energy spent. The creative work that might have existed if I had trusted my instincts a decade earlier. The relationships I kept at arm's length because intimacy felt dangerous to someone who had learned that the people closest to you were the ones most likely to look through you. It looks like sitting with that grief instead of filing it away. It looks like getting up the next morning anyway. My mother and I had dinner alone last month. Just the two of us, her suggestion, which was itself new. A restaurant she had chosen carefully, not the most expensive one or the most impressive one, but a small neighborhood place she had heard me mention once, which meant she had been listening, which meant something. We talked for 3 hours. Not about Victoria. Not about the baby shower or the birthday or the organizational things. About her childhood, her own mother, the particular damage that had been handed to her before she handed versions of it to me. She talked with the careful honesty of someone who has been doing their own work, in their own way, at their own pace. I listened. Not to excuse. Not to explain away what had been done. But to understand, because understanding the mechanism, I had learned, was how you freed yourself from it. How you stopped carrying other people's unprocessed wounds as if they were your own failures. At the end of dinner, she reached into her bag and took out an envelope. "I've been going to therapy," she said. "Since October." I looked at her. "You didn't tell me," I said. "I wasn't ready to tell you," she said. I wanted to go for a while first. To see if I could actually do it. Before I said anything. She looked at the envelope in her hands. "My therapist suggested I write you a letter. I wrote 11 drafts." She almost smiled. "This is the 12th. She held it out. I took it. I didn't open it at the table. That felt like something to do privately, in my own space, with enough room around me to feel whatever I was going to feel. "Thank you," I said. She nodded. Her composure was intact, but different. Not the armor I had always known. The careful presentation of a woman who could not afford to be seen. Something more deliberate. The composure of someone who is choosing to hold themselves together rather than needing to. A small distinction. An enormous one. I read the letter that night. Sitting at my drafting table with the photograph of 12-year-old Grace beside me and the painting on the wall, the blue one, deep and layered, the one my mother had called the most beautiful thing in the room. The letter was 4 pages. Handwritten. The 12th draft, she had said. I could feel the drafts behind it, the places where sentences had been rewritten until they were as honest as she could make them. She wrote about her own mother. About learning early that love was conditional and transactional and had to be earned through performance. About transferring that onto her daughters without understanding she was doing it. About the specific moment, reading Victoria's birthday in her phone contacts, she wrote, and realizing she had your birthday listed wrong for 3 years and had never noticed, that had cracked something open in her. She wrote, "I've been looking at Victoria my whole life, because looking at Victoria was like looking at the best version of myself. I've been looking away from you because looking at you was like looking at all the parts of myself I was afraid of. Your independence. Your willingness to feel things. Your refusal to perform happiness you didn't feel. I called those things difficult. I understand now that I called them difficult because they frightened me. Because they were the things I had buried in myself and you had somehow kept alive." I sat with that paragraph for a long time. She wrote, "I am not asking you to forgive me. I am not sure I have earned that yet. I am telling you that I see you. I should have said that 33 years ago. I am saying it now because now is what I have." The letter ended. "You are the most original person I have ever known. I wasted too many years not telling you that. I am telling you now." I set the letter down. I pressed my hands flat on the table. I looked at 12-year-old Grace with her ribbon. I cried, the real kind, the kind that comes from somewhere below language, from the place where all the folded-away moments live. Not with grief exactly. With something more complicated. The particular emotion of receiving something long overdue, the mixture of relief and sorrow and gratitude, and the ache of all the years it didn't come sooner. I cried until I was empty. Then I washed my face. Then I picked up a brush and painted for 2 hours. I want to say something to you now. Wherever you are watching this. Whatever brought you to this story, whether you recognized yourself in Grace or in Victoria or even in the Mothr, trying imperfectly to become something different than what she was handed. You are not defined by what was done to you in the years when you had no choice about who was around you and how they treated you. You are defined by what you do with the life you are living now, in the years when you do have a choice. The choice is not easy. It is not a single moment of decision that changes everything overnight. It is hundreds of small choices made in the direction of your own truth. It is telling Dr. Lena the unedited version. It is buying your own birthday cake when the call doesn't come. It is standing at a gallery show watching people look at something you made from the most painful material of your life and understanding that pain is not wasted when it becomes something beautiful. It is saying to your mother, calmly, directly, without cruelty and without apology, "This is what I need." And then meaning it. And then continuing to mean it even when the pattern slips and the old dynamic surfaces, and the easy thing would be to file it away again. It is looking at the child you were, 12 years old, with a ribbon and pride and the complete certainty that she was capable of something worth seeing, and saying, "I see you. I've always seen you. And you were right. I want to hear from you." Have you ever had to set boundaries with a parent? Have you ever been the overlooked child, the reliable one, the one who handled the organizational things while someone else stood in the center of the room? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. I love knowing how far these stories reach. If this story moved you, please take a moment to subscribe, and hit the notification bell. It helps more people find these stories when they need them most. And if you want more stories like this, check the description. I have linked some of my favorites there. Until next time. You were never too much. You were never too sensitive. You were never the problem. You were simply in the wrong room. Find your right room. Build it if you have to. And never let anyone make you invisible in it again.